Oh, blessed Jesus, look at that. How many?
America is no stranger to storms, but this month, something changed. Across the nation, the skies have begun to speak. Glowing figures in the clouds, unearthly trumpet sounds echoing in the night, and blood-red skies where there were no fires. Multiple cameras, multiple cities, one pattern. These are not illusions, not internet tricks, but real events, caught from different angles, confirmed by stunned witnesses. So we ask, are these divine signs, or just misunderstood weather? In Luke 21 and Matthew 24, Jesus warned, "There will be signs in the heavens, and the powers of the heavens will be shaken." And now, those signs may be here. Stay with us, because what's happening isn't just news. It might be prophecy. It began on the evening of June 13th, as twilight fell across Houston, Texas. Heavy clouds gathered in the distance, the kind that signal a brewing storm, and most residents thought little of it. But above the dark skyline, something unexplainable appeared. Something that would leave even skeptics speechless. A glowing figure, suspended in the clouds. It wasn't imagined. It wasn't the tricks of light people often chalk up to weather. This was different. Strikingly different. Multiple eyewitnesses from different parts of the city described the same thing. A clearly formed silhouette, with what looked like feathered wings extending wide. A glowing torso, luminous and defined, not blurred or distorted by wind or cloud movement. And most astonishing, it wasn't moving. It hovered, still and silent, above the horizon. Photos and videos quickly surfaced online. Even in their grainy format, something clearly shaped could be seen. A form, humanoid, radiant, winged, and with it came a strange stillness, as if the very air paused to acknowledge it. Some people who saw it were overwhelmed with peace, as though something holy had visited their city. Others admitted they felt the opposite, a rising tension in their chest, a sense that something beyond human comprehension had entered the atmosphere, and it wasn't here to comfort. Within hours, the skies opened, and Houston was hit with a storm of biblical proportions. Floodwaters surged through neighborhoods. Cars floated like toys. Families scrambled to rooftops. Emergency crews were caught off guard. The timing was no coincidence. And so we asked the question, was this glowing figure a heavenly visitor? A sign sent to warn? Or something far more terrifying? A harbinger of divine judgment? In Luke 21:11, Jesus warns, "There will be great earthquakes, famines and pestilences in various places, and fearful events and great signs from heaven." Not subtle signs, not whispers, great signs, fearful sights. What does it mean when something that seems celestial appears right before disaster? What happens when the heavens try to speak, and we're too distracted to listen? Throughout history, appearances in the skies have carried deep meaning, from the star over Bethlehem to the darkened sun at Christ's crucifixion. The sky, it seems, is God's canvas, and sometimes He paints in fire and storm. By dawn on June 14th, the beauty of that strange apparition had given way to chaos. Houston was underwater. The rainfall was relentless, over 10 inches in just a few hours. Highways vanished. Entire subdivisions were submerged. People clung to floating debris as they waited to be rescued. Rescue helicopters hovered above flooded neighborhoods, airlifting the elderly and children from rooftops. Boats became the only reliable form of transportation. It wasn't just a storm, it was a deluge. One man, standing ankle-deep in water inside his living room, told a reporter, "This feels like Noah's flood. Like, this is what judgment must have looked like." His words weren't just poetic. They were eerily prophetic. In the book of Genesis, God sends a flood to cleanse a world steeped in violence and corruption. And though the rainbow was a promise never to destroy the world again in that way, Scripture is filled with patterns, echoes of the past replayed in the future. In Matthew 24:37, Jesus tells his disciples, "As it was in the days of Noah, so shall it be at the coming of the Son of Man." The world before the flood, consumed by greed, lust, lawlessness, and spiritual apathy, mirrors much of what we see today. And so, is it a stretch to wonder, are we repeating the cycle? Are these floods just natural disasters? Or are they warnings dressed in water? Throughout history, floods have been seen not just as meteorological events, but as symbols of cleansing, judgment, and transition. From ancient Mesopotamia's flood myths to China's Yellow River catastrophes, cultures have long believed water carries a message. Houston's flood, one of the worst in its history, came immediately after the angelic figure appeared. That timing cannot be dismissed as chance. There's a rhythm here, a divine sequence, a sign, followed by consequence. Perhaps the question isn't whether God still sends messages. Perhaps it's whether we've stopped listening. And yet, even this wasn't the end. Because just a day later, the signs would spread to the skies over a very different city. June 15th, Denver, Colorado. The city had no warnings, no approaching storm. The skies were calm. But then, just after sunset, it appeared. A blood-red sky, not the warm crimson of a mountain dusk. This was something far more unnatural. People looked up and froze. The entire sky was saturated in a deep, pulsing red, with a strange glow that seemed to move in circles through the clouds. There was no fire nearby, no smoke. The FAA offered no explanation. Social media exploded with photos, videos, and desperate questions. What is this? Are we in danger? Is it a portal, a warning, a sign? And one phrase appeared over and over again: "It looks like blood in the sky," which brings us straight to Acts 2:20. "The sun shall be turned into darkness, and the moon into blood, before the coming of the great and glorious day of the Lord." While many interpret this as symbolic, others see these signs literally unfolding before our eyes. Could this be the fulfillment? Or at the very least, a foreshadowing of what is yet to come? Houston, a glowing angel, then a flood. Denver, a crimson sky. No fire, no cause. Is the pattern not obvious? When signs stack upon each other in rapid succession, it ceases to be coincidence. It becomes a message. And just maybe, that message is urgent. From Texas to Colorado, from light to blood, the heavens have spoken. The only question now is, are we willing to hear them? As the world turned its gaze toward Texas and Denver, another sign was preparing to emerge, this time from the Pacific coast. It was late June when Los Angeles residents were startled by a strange and sudden light show. Not fireworks, not lightning, something else. Shortly before a 4.1 magnitude earthquake struck the area, eyewitnesses across parts of the city reported seeing bright flashes, bluish-white illuminations that lit up the sky in bursts. These weren't accompanied by thunder. There were no storms, no electrical activity, just an eerie silence and a sky that pulsed with light. One woman posted, "It looked like the heavens opened and blinked 3 times. Then the ground started shaking." Science has a term for this: earthquake lights. But the truth is, no one really knows what causes them. Some theories suggest electromagnetic charges released during tectonic stress. Others propose that quartz in rocks may emit light when compressed. But these explanations remain speculative. Even major geological studies admit these phenomena are rare, poorly understood, and incredibly difficult to predict or replicate. And yet, the pattern keeps repeating. From ancient Greece to pre-Columbian Peru, people have reported mysterious lights before devastating quakes. In 1975, just before the Haicheng earthquake in China, thousands witnessed shimmering lights in the night sky. Moments before over 90% of buildings in the area were reduced to rubble. In Italy, during the L'Aquila quake of 2009, blue flashes were seen moments before buildings began to fall. So, what are they? Natural phenomena? Earth's final warning? Or something more? Something spiritual? The Bible tells us that nature itself is not neutral. In Romans 8:22, Paul writes, "We know that the whole creation has been groaning, as in the pains of childbirth right up to the present time." Groaning, trembling, preparing. Earthquakes in Scripture are more than geological events. They are divine disruptions. When Christ died on the cross, the earth shook. When the stone rolled away from the tomb, there was a great earthquake. And in Matthew 24:7, Jesus prophesied, "There will be famines and earthquakes in various places." But he didn't stop there. He called these signs the beginning of birth pains. Birth pains, a process of upheaval leading to new creation, but also judgment. So what happens when the earth itself begins to cry out? When light flashes in the sky and the ground answers with trembling? Is this just the tension of fault lines? Or is it the tension of a world teetering at the edge of spiritual reckoning? In the silence after the quake, many went back to their routines. But a few stood outside longer, looking up, wondering. Because when both heaven and earth begin to speak in tandem, it's time to listen. And the next sign wouldn't come in flashes or tremors, but in something far older. It began slowly, a few recordings shared online, brushed off as hoaxes or echoes. But then, the sounds multiplied. In the early days of July, strange, untraceable, trumpet-like sounds began to emerge across North America. From New York to Kansas, from rural hills to urban skylines, people reported hearing deep, metallic hums and long, resonant horn blasts, often in the dead of night. They weren't caused by trains. They didn't echo from construction zones. And they didn't follow any known weather patterns. People stood in their driveways, phones in hand, recording what they could. In one viral clip from Buffalo, crowds gather in confusion, looking up as a sound, low, haunting, brassy, pulses across the night air. Children cover their ears. Animals bark, screech, or flee. The sky is clear, but the atmosphere is charged. It's not just noise. It feels intentional. Some described it as music without a melody, like the prelude to something vast. Others wept openly, saying it felt like a warning no one could translate. Of course, some skeptics offer theories: shifting tectonic plates, skyquakes, distant storms, or atmospheric ducts bouncing urban noise. But none of these fully account for the scale, the geographic reach, or the emotional effect of these sounds. Because what makes this moment so startling is what Scripture already told us. In Revelation 8, as the Lamb opens the seventh seal, 7 angels stood before God, and to them were given 7 trumpets. Each trumpet that sounds in that chapter unleashes a divine act: hail and fire, poisoned waters, darkened skies, demonic torment, and the fall of kingdoms. The trumpet is not just a sound, It is a symbol of confrontation, of declaration, of transition. In the Old Testament, trumpets were used to warn of battle, to call people to worship, or to signal the presence of God. At Mount Sinai, the Israelites trembled as the sound of the trumpet grew louder and louder, and the mountain smoked with divine presence. Could it be that what we're hearing is not from earth, but from heaven's gates? A spiritual reverberation, announcing that we are entering a new and fearful season? One viewer said it best. It wasn't a sound, it was a message. If that's true, then the question becomes, what is the message? And how much time remains to respond? As the trumpet echoes fade, another sound rises. Not in the skies this time, but in the water, and it speaks of blood. Along the winding path of the Mississippi River, in the hot early days of July, a plague appeared. It didn't come with locusts. It didn't arrive with thunder or fire. Instead, it came silently, coating the water in red. Fishermen in Louisiana were the first to spot it. Entire sections of the river glowed with a reddish tint. At first, many thought it was sediment stirred up by storms, but there had been no recent rainfall. Then came the smell: rot, decay, death. Hundreds of fish floated lifeless at the surface. Not one species, all types, large and small, predator and prey. Ecologists were baffled. Tests ruled out chemical spills, no dam breaks, no red tide algae, no known cause. The river looked like it was bleeding, one man said. Another whispered, "I've fished these waters for 30 years. I've never seen anything like this." And suddenly, the image became biblical. Exodus 7:20-21. "And all the waters that were in the river were turned to blood, and the fish that were in the river died, and the river stank." This was the first plague sent upon Pharaoh and Egypt, a divine confrontation of pride, idolatry, and oppression. A warning not just to the powerful, but to a people who had closed their ears to God's call. It happened in places where snow is not just rare, it's unthinkable. In early July, residents of Phoenix, Arizona, and parts of Las Vegas, Nevada, awoke to something no forecast had warned of: snow. Not hail, not sleet. Actual snow. Fluffy, white flakes falling silently over the hot, dry soil of the desert. Locals stepped outside in stunned silence. The scenes were surreal: cacti covered in snow, dry canyon roads blanketed in white, palm trees dusted with frost. Temperatures had dropped sharply in a matter of hours, far below the norm for July. Meteorologists scrambled to explain it, calling it a rare upper atmospheric disruption, an unusual mix of pressure systems, moisture surges, and jet stream shifts. But the question echoed louder than any forecast could answer. Why now? And why here? In Scripture, snow often represents purity, judgment, or the overwhelming power of God's control over creation. In Job 38:22, God speaks from the whirlwind and asks, "Have you entered the storehouses of the snow, or seen the storehouses of the hail, which I reserve for times of trouble, for days of war and battle?" This verse doesn't just speak of meteorology, it speaks of divine authority, that God keeps snow and hail in reserve, to be released not at random, but at specific times, for specific purposes. So when snow descends on the desert, a place defined by heat, drought, and fire, it feels like more than weather. It feels like a reversal, a disruption of what is natural by what is supernatural. And in the Bible, these reversals always mean something. The sun stood still for Joshua. Waters parted for Moses. Fire consumed wet stones for Elijah. God's messages often come through nature acting against itself, not because creation is confused, but because the Creator is speaking. This wasn't just snow. It was a sign that even the elements obey him, and that when he wants to speak to a people hardened by comfort, prosperity, and pride, he can make it snow in the desert. But the signs weren't done, because next came something even more symbolic, a mist over the capital. Let's take a breath and step back. What have we witnessed? A glowing angel suspended over Houston, a flood that tore through the city the next day, a crimson sky in Denver, pulsing like blood, a mysterious quake in California, preceded by flashes of heavenly light, trumpet sounds echoing across America with no visible source, a bleeding river in the south, filled with lifeless fish, snow in the desert, flipping nature on its head. And finally, a halo over the capital, silently crowning America's power with something otherworldly. 8 signs, 1 country, 30 days. Coincidence? Or is something bigger happening? In Luke 21:25, Jesus says, "There will be signs in the sun, moon, and stars. On the earth, nations will be in anguish. Men will faint from terror, apprehensive of what is coming on the world." Matthew 24 speaks of birth pains, signs increasing in frequency and intensity. Revelation 6-8 lists earthquakes, signs in the heavens, trumpet blasts, poisoned waters, and heavenly messengers, not as random disasters, but as divine signals. But here's the deeper truth. These events are not always judgments. They are invitations. Warnings are mercy. Signs are grace. They're not about condemnation, but about correction. They're not meant to produce panic, but awakening. The signs are multiplying, and they're growing louder, clearer, and more aligned with the ancient texts we've too often forgotten. So, the question shifts, not just what's happening, but what must we do now? Because the signs are not only around us, they are pointing us somewhere. It's now. You've seen the signs, not just in Scripture, but in your headlines, not just on pages, but in the skies, in the waters, in the earth. So here is the message. Return to the Lord. Open your eyes. Don't dismiss what's divine because it's uncomfortable. Don't trade truth for the illusion of control. Cities have shaken, waters have turned, the skies have lit up. But the question remains, will your heart tremble? These signs weren't sent to terrify. They were sent to wake us up. Are you watching? Are you listening? Are you ready? Don't harden your heart. Don't wait for silence before you speak back to God. Because He's already speaking. He is coming. The signs are here, and time may be running out. If you feel this message stirring something inside you, don't ignore it. Like, comment, subscribe, and most of all, share it. Let the message travel faster than fear. Let it stir a generation awake before the next sign arrives.